Rise, Ascendant, for this is the ending that we all deserve.
What's up guys, Virus here. So after my Immortal build got instantly patched a couple months ago, I decided to go all in on a meme idea for my last Mirage build, which is what you just witnessed. Nearly 300 zombies suspended in midair, and I used them to make a build. This is still viable in 3.29 Curse of the Allflame League, and while it's not a league starter, it might be worth bookmarking if you're interested in the meme potential for your second or third build. Fair warning though, this isn't meant for beginners and there is jank involved. Anyway, let's get into it. So the core mechanic revolves around Ray Zombie of Falling. If you're not familiar with this transfigured gem, normally you cast these zombies and they fall quickly to the ground to deal area damage and immediately die upon landing, and that's it. You might have previously seen a popular triggerbot Saboteur build using these falling zombies for damage. Now, during this travel time from the sky to the ground, however, the zombies are actually considered alive, can be damaged, and can be affected by ailments. Most noteworthy is that their action speed can be affected by chill and freeze, which happens to directly slow their falling speed. So if you can bring the zombies' action speed to 0%, they'll stay frozen in the air. Unfortunately, there aren't any reliable ways to freeze them, but what you can do is slow their action speed to 0% another way, which is by using Replica Rumi's concoction, which states petrified during effect. You can apply this flask to your zombies by using Umbilicus Immortalis, or the Foulborn version, which causes them to be petrified for the duration. With the duration enchantment from Enkindling Orb, you can make the flask last at least 6+ seconds. By using an Arcanist brand recall trigger bots setup to trigger the zombies, and lots of sources of flask charges gained to sustain the flask, both of which I'll cover in more detail later, I was then able to steadily ramp up the number of zombies in the air. Since Ray Zombie of Falling has a limit of 200 zombies, you can actually get nearly 300 when using Congregation support, which was introduced in Mirage League. Note that you can't use Dark Monarch to double this number because it would disable trigger bots, which are considered minions unfortunately. The big question you might have is why bother at all? Well, the Keepers League introduced the Katarina Bloodline, which has a node called Umbral Army, which states 15% increased attack damage per raised zombie. So with nearly 300 zombies, you can get almost 4,500% attack damage scaling, which is a ridiculous amount. Bone Melt was also introduced in Keepers, which grants percent increased defenses per minion from your non-vol skills. So with Volatile Vol Orb and Tempering Catalysts, you can actually get 6% defenses per minion. So again, with nearly 300 zombies, this translates to almost 1,800% increased defenses. So keeping the zombies in midair allows you to scale both your damage and defenses like crazy. And with one item in particular, you can push this even further. That's Ephemeral Edge, which has a line that states, attacks with this weapon have added maximum lightning damage equal to 10 to 15% of player's maximum energy shield. So this ends up being ultra synergistic with this package because you already have high energy shield and attack damage scaling granted by your zombies. And then all that's really left is finding an attack skill to use In my case, I used Automated General's Cry with various skills like Static Strike, Consecrated Path, Blade Storm. I ended up liking Consecrated Path for mapping and Static Strike for bossing, especially because the beams from each Mirage can stack, so with some duration, you can have like 20 simultaneous beams going, adding up to something like 350 plus million DPS. So let's go over the mechanics of how we actually get so many zombies in the air. As you saw, the trick is using Arcanist Brand, Brand Recall, and Triggerbots to generate the zombies. This tech has been used for various cool and unique builds, but if you're not familiar with it, here's how it works. When you cast Arcanist Brand, it pulses and activates every so often when attached to an enemy, causing a linked spell to trigger, in this case Raise Zombie of Falling. Brand Recall, as the name suggests, recalls your brands and activates them regardless of being attached to an enemy. So with 7 brands out, a brand recall will activate all 7 and then go on cooldown. However, with trigger bots, brand recall will trigger twice and then cause each Arcanist brand to trigger twice as well. So you get 7 times 2 times 2 equals 28 spell triggers or zombies per use of brand recall. Now, if you bring the brand recall cooldown to around 2 seconds and link it with automation, you can start a map and slowly ramp up the zombies until you reach the maximum after about 20 or so seconds. So you have the zombie generation, but this only solves the problem part way, as you still need to petrify the zombies while they're falling. If you use the flask too early or too late, the zombies will either not be alive yet or be dead, and so the flask won't actually apply to them. And here's the catch, and perhaps the elephant in the room. There's no way to automate the flask press, so you need to press it every 2 seconds or whatever your brand recall cooldown is by timing the fall of the zombies. In my setup, I've found that pressing the flask around the 3 to 6 o'clock range of the cooldown is pretty reliable, and all you really do is press it whenever the cooldown comes back around. So it's actually quite forgiving, and you don't have to be exact. Now, I know it still sounds bad, but hear me out. It's not that bad. I'll tell you why. Number one, only the initial ramp up of zombies really matters. And once you're hovering around 250 to 280 plus zombies, you can press the flask every 6 to 8 seconds because at this point you're not trying to get additional zombies in the air, just maintaining the ones already there, which is purely based on the duration of your flask. So if you've played Minion Pact BV, you're already used to clicking BV before the stacks run out, and this shouldn't really feel too different. You're just pressing the flask before the duration runs out. Number two, it's okay to miss triggers, so you can just time your flask press for the next trigger once another 2 seconds go by. It's not a big deal, and actually with the minion 5% life on death mastery, it actually helps heal your other minions. Number three, one method I like to use is a tool that clones your frames. I use Exile UI, which is a TOS compliant tool, to clone the frames here to the middle of the screen. So basically whatever I see on the skill bar is what will show up here. You can't see it right now because I'm only recording my Path of Exile client, but it makes it a lot easier to track the cooldown without having to move my eyes much. One other method, if you're okay with a slower ramp up, is you can make the brand recall cooldown like 2.5 to 3 seconds instead to make flask presses less frequent and also not have to invest so much into gaining flask charges. I just thought it might be helpful to take a quick pause and remind everyone of GGG's terms of service. No real reason other than as a helpful reminder. Now, what I also do want to share with you is a quote that I just made up, which is, the greater the meme, the greater the cost to your hardware, hands, sanity, or a combination of them. I don't think my build is the worst offender, but it's fair to take this into account when evaluating whether you can handle playing it. So here's my breakdown. Hardware, medium impact. There is definitely lag associated with having 300 zombies petrified in the air, who would have thought? Hands, medium to high impact, and sanity, medium impact. This build might drive you insane. I don't think that possibility can ever be ruled out entirely, But hey, we're playing Path of Exile, we didn't have much sanity to begin with. Alright, I never actually got around to talking about gaining flask charges, but basically you need a ton of percent increased flask charges gained, combined with a couple flat sources, to be able to do bosses with no adds, namely Brutal Restraint, which has the Traitor Keystone, which gives 4 flask charges every 5 seconds per empty flask slot. With 4 empty slots, that's 16 charges every 5 seconds. You can get another flask charge every 3 seconds from the Foulborn Belt. You can scale flask charges gained by getting passives on the tree and fasting and brute for potency cluster jewels. I got a total of 249% increased flask charges gained and 15% reduced charges used, which made replica roomies use 25 charges, and I would gain 12.33 charges back per second, or around 25 every 2 seconds. This allows me to effectively not lose charges if pressing the flask every 2 seconds, which is why I adjusted the automated brand recall cooldown to 2 seconds as well. As a reminder, the flask duration on zombies is exactly what is displayed on the flask, as flask effect duration is a player stat and not a minion stat. Also note that flask charges are gained normally because you are not the one being affected due to the belt, so the flask enchantment gains no charges during effect, does not affect you. For all of this to work, you need to save your button clicks for casting Arcanist Brand to generate zombies, so you need an automated damage delivery method that is also attack-based, which is why I chose General's Cry. Because I chose General's Cry as my skill, I need corpses for the Mirage Warriors to spawn from, as per the skill description. So I used Akuna's Will to make my zombies count as corpses. I basically avoided using Desecrate because it would be another button to press. However, Akuna's Will does make your zombies susceptible to corpse explosions. I took Prolonged Servitude from the Katarina bloodline, thinking it would prevent my zombies from exploding, but unfortunately it doesn't work, so that's something I should have tested first. However, it still seems worth taking to prevent zombies from dying in general, as they're not the most tanky. So together with Blessed Rebirth, you'll have a minimum of 10 seconds uptime on zombies. But you can also choose to get Born in the Shadows instead of Prolonged Servitude. Anyway, if I were to do this again, I'd probably avoid using Akuna's Will or just don't farm Strongboxes. This does bring up the question if you really need to play General's Cry, and the answer is maybe no. I can see a world where you play Static Strike on its own, since it is a duration-based attack. It does remove the need for corpses, so you can drop Akuna's Will, but you'll have to keep in mind you won't have much visibility at all due to the zombies on your screen. And since we're on the topic of skills, do not use Convocation unless you want to lag to infinity. Something about teleporting 300 minions to you every few seconds sounds kind of bad for your frame rate. I want to talk about defenses for a moment, mostly because you might have seen on Bone Meld this stat that says -2% to all resistances per non-vol minion. For this build, this basically means you have -600% resists, which is capped to -200% because that's the minimum you can get to. The best way to solve this is to convert all elemental damage taken to lightning, and then use Doriani's prototype to not be affected by lightning resistance, and allow armor to apply to lightning hits. You can do this with Sublime Vision Purity of Lightning, Watcher's Eye while affected by Purity of Lightning, Font of Lightning, and Bound by Destiny to take the last 10% of elemental damage as Chaos instead, as long as you're wearing 4 Hunter items. So with the Turtle Spectre granting Determination, you have 80k plus armor from Bone Meld defenses scaling, so you end up being pretty tanky. This still leaves us a little prone to elemental damage over time, but we have a massive ES pool and can grab Lethe Shade if needed. I have no idea if that's the right way to say it. I chose not to bother because this is softcore. Back to Bone Meld for a second, you'll also notice I got a low roll of 41% resistances added to minions. This is preferred because it reduces how much negative resists we give our zombies and specters. So I invest in minion resists to make sure my specters are res capped, since they provide pretty important defenses as well as lucky damage from Perfect Spirit of Fortune. One last call out about items. On Ephemeral Edge, you don't actually need the Resolute Technique Fall Corruption. It's nice to have, but if you don't have it, then you can just get a few high accuracy rolls on the rest of your gear, and you should be able to get close to 100% accuracy. Maybe you'll need one accuracy wheel, but this cuts down on the cost of this build significantly. Now, before I wrap up this video, there is a new archetype in 3.29 that doesn't require you to go Umbral Army for attack damage scaling, and that is the reworked Minion Pact. Per the patch notes, it's been reworked and is now called Communion Support. It supports spell skills that hit enemies and cannot modify the skills of minions. Supported spells deal 20 to 30 added physical damage for each permanent minion at gem level 3. Since zombies don't have a duration, presumably with 300 zombies and a high level communion support gem, you can still get 10k flat physical damage, so there might still be something there for people to discover. Now, I probably shouldn't have left this for the very end of the video, but this may get patched because of unintentional behavior, so fair warning. I don't think GGG intended for hundreds of minions to be permanently cluttering your screen, and it can get laggy, especially in juiced content. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for more high effort garbage. I might get a late league start, but I hope to release more tech, and of course meme builds in 3.29. Happy league start, and until next time.